Okay, welcome to the Shed of Knowledge. I'm your old pal John the Storyteller. We're back together here in the Shed of Knowledge, and you want to hear about something weird or interesting, and that's what I'm here to do. Thank you for joining me, and I'm going to start off by doing something that's a little unusual, and that is endorsing my competition. Uh, this particular story that I'm getting ready to relay is something that was made or that was brought to my attention by a podcast that I listen to all the time. I think there's over 200 episodes of this podcast. Now, he'll get into some ghost stories and a couple other things that I don't do. Like, I don't do ghost stories or anything like that. But his research team or him just does a fabulous job. They're in little 15-minute segments. They are not a video series, but it is called Aaron Manhnke's Cabinet of Curiosities. So if you like the content that you see here on Something Interesting, Aaron Manhnke has a lot more of it. So far, we've only crossed paths on one story that I know of. So I've kept it a little bit different, and I'm glad. I don't want to repeat the same things over and over. The idea behind Something Interesting is that this is stuff that you don't know, but that's also the idea behind his podcast. And so anyway, check it out, Aaron Manhnke's Cabinet of Curiosities. I listen to it on Spotify, but I believe it's probably available other places, other streaming services, other things like that. Anyway, so today's story takes place in World War I, and it is not a war story, but it is a spy story, so that's always good, right? Spies and whatnot. Well, in World War I, in France, France was fighting Germany, in case you don't know your history at all, and Germany sent spies to France to collect information, and I mean, they were spies. They spied. That's what they did. So there was this particular spy named Peter Carpin, and he was living in France and spying for the Germans, and he was caught. He was caught by the French authorities, and they said, well, what do we do? Do we tell the Germans, hey, we caught your guy, and work something out or whatever? And they said, no. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to continue the correspondence between German officials and Peter Carpin, but we are going to give them misinformation. And it was highly effective. They thought they were talking to their spy, and so they made military decisions based on Peter Carpin's, or really the French government's, fake information. Now, the other thing that the German command did was they sent Peter money for living expenses and other projects that they may have had him working on. And the French government kept that money and put it in a bank account. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was some money. They kept that money and put it in a bank account. Well, after a while, thanks to the, I guess, incompetent boobery of the French government, somehow Peter Carpin escaped. And they were like, well, crap, there goes our, little gravy train there. So we tried. But anyway, they took, at that point, they were like, well, we're not getting any more money, obviously, because he's back in Germany by now. And so they took the money that they had taken from Peter Carpin, and it was enough to buy a car. They bought a car, for state use and that sort of thing. With the money. Well, the war ended and the Allies won, obviously. France was on the victorious side. And but in Germany, even after the war, because of the Treaty of Versailles was very, like an iron fist. Hyperinflation like we've never even imagined happened in Germany. So there were a lot of people that fought against or that were very upset about the way things were. And so these little pockets of resistance started popping up. And it was up to the Allies to kind of squash that, wherever they may have been. And so a pocket of resistance popped up, and France, went over to take care of business, and they brought the car with them, kind of a symbol of, hey, this was bought with spy money. It's like we can't have this mess going on. So they brought the car with them, and while they were over in Germany, a French official was driving the car and struck a pedestrian, uh, which is terrible in any situation, but obviously in a hostile situation, it's bad. He struck a pedestrian. He got out of the car, and he ran up to the pedestrian, and there were several people in the car. They realized that this guy was dead. I mean, he was dead. They hit him with the car and killed him, and they were horrified. Obviously, it's like, oh my God, what have we done? And they started looking at the guy, and the people in the car were like, we know this guy. It was Peter Carpin, the spy. Peter Carpin was killed years later by, or a couple years later, by the car that the French government bought with the money that they took from him. Now that's something interesting. Thank you, Aaron Manhnke, and I will be listening.